I just want to start by kind of echoing what Rosie said today, which is a big thank you to the BSA for giving me the bursary. It's been an amazing opportunity to come to this kind of extraordinary city and to spend time with the BSA. It's been like a really great community to be part of and very stimulating to kind of hear lots of different talks and lots of different kind of ways of thinking about things. It's been really interesting and warm and fun to be here and to kind of explore Athens from here. I'm going to start. I thought today I keep kind of very informal. Please just like chip in with any like thoughts or comments and kind of any ideas as we go. But what I thought I'd start with is to show you a bit about kind of one aspect of the work I do, to kind of illustrate and to kind of demonstrate, some kind of help explain some of the work I've been doing here in Athens. So I'm going to start off by showing you some slides of this work, and then I'm going to show you some slides of kind of artists I'm interested in a very kind of straightforward way, and then I'm going to show you some pictures of my work, followed by some kind of images of what I've been doing here. And then last but not least, if you've got time again, as Kathy said, have a drink and come and see what I've got upstairs. I'm a painter, and as you may see from the flyer, I kind of paint abstract paintings. This is a kind of relatively recent painting. It's about 1 metre by 1.5 meters, and it's kind of oil and various different materials on paper. And I'll show you some images of this, but first of all, I'm just going to show you some images by an artist called Richard Wentworth, who's a kind of influential, but not terribly famous, but like very influential English sculptor, who kind of was part of a movement called the New British Sculpture movement in the kind of 1980s. And he taught at Goldsmiths, I think, at the same time kind of lots of YBAs were coming out, so kind of Damien Hirst and Fiona Ray and Gary Hughes. But I'll just show you a few images. His work is about kind of language, I think, and about kind of how we assign meanings to objects, and then what happens when you kind of tweak, you kind of subvert those meanings and kind of change what those meanings are. And he uses very everyday objects, kind of very unheroic but somehow symbolic objects, like chairs, or this isn't a chair, and kind of brooms and stuff. And then he kind of, so you kind of know what they're about, and then he kind of very gently but quite forcibly like changes their context or changes their function, and it not only kind of animates what those objects, it kind of gives new meaning to those objects, but I kind of think it gets at some kind of verbal uncanny or something, some way in which kind of words are descriptions of things kind of fail, they kind of stop working, and it kind of just makes us think about what these things are. And this work is called Style, and this one is called Siege, or Siège, which I think is a French word for seat. But also obviously the kind of word for like, being trapped or blockaded in English. And I just really like it. It's like really simple. It's 2 chairs with little holes cut in them, and then kind of like balls hanging from them. And it's something about a kind of trapped masculinity, a kind of awkward kind of maleness. And I like it because it's so simple, and it's very like, it's quite funny, and it's quite kind of not that po-faced. And I found there's a good quote he used, which is, he said about this work, it stemmed from a very different moment in gender politics, and is now more common to discuss how pathetic. It's now more common to discuss how pathetic men are. I used to think most of the time that I feel pathetic, and why shouldn't one make work about that? And I just like that idea. It's kind of, it's very simple. But anyway, I showed you these images because actually I wanted to show you some images of a series of photographs he did, which are called Making Do and Getting By, which is a series of photos of things he observed in the street, and they're kind of little physical coincidences or kind of conjunctions of things, and they're kind of photos of the evidence of like human solutions in an urban space, and they're just kind of funny little observed things. They're quite beautiful in some way, and it's really annoying. I haven't got very good images of them. They don't quite show how kind of delicate and beautiful and kind of funny they are. But I've shown them because I saw Christian's work a couple of years ago, and at the photographer's gallery of this, and there's something I really like about the way of looking he uses in this work. It's kind of a very democratic way of looking at everything, and kind of looking at the local, looking at your kind of local area. You can go anywhere, but even the kind of closest, most mundane spaces have these like extraordinary events, these little kind of incidents of kind of human beauty. He worked in an area really close to where I lived called King's Cross, which is in London. It's kind of used to be quite a run-down area. And what seeing that exhibition did was it kind of helped me understand, to kind of help me start to look at things in a different way, and to kind of try and observe the world in which I live in a kind of much more immediate way, and not have to look for like something really beautiful, but just to kind of, when out and about, to like start looking at the world and start seeing what potential meanings and what potential things there are just there and about. And I also show this work because, in a way, one bit of the work I do, I've basically taken quite straightforwardly from him. And what I do is one bit of my practice is I look a lot. I go for walks in urban spaces and other places and just kind of look at the world. And I take images, which are quite similar. So forgive the copy. But I wanted to show some images of things that they're basically like things that I've seen, little kind of things that I've noticed and kind of paid attention to. They're like, they're kind of not amazing quality images. I just take them with my mobile phone. They're not kind of meant to be photos exactly. They're more like sketches of kind of interesting, shapes and forms and colours and textures that I've seen, and I'll come to in a bit, they're kind of about like abstract painting, but it seems to me they're kind of, one thing about abstract painting is it employs our kind of implicit knowledge of forms to kind of suggest emotions or to suggest feelings. And what I do is I kind of go around looking at things and kind of observing, and they're just like records of these like potential feelings you get when you kind of see funny things. Anyway, so I just wanted to show some of them, and they're quite mundane. They're not like they're very day-to-day things, but you can, if you look in the right way, maybe they have something. And the other reason why I do this is I think a really important part of being an artist is, one of the fun bits of being an artist is you get to like look at things, and that looking can be quite useful. And I think looking is like a really important practice to do, because the more you look, you might see something. And there's something about art which is meant to one of the ways art can be useful is that artists can help you see things in new ways and can kind of reanimate them and kind of make you aware of different things. And it's one of the jobs of an artist to kind of look, I think. And so yeah, anyway, these are just some photos of my kind of noticing some things. And you'll see they kind of relate to some of the images, some of the things, the forms I use in my work, but kind of tangentially maybe. And I kind of like that, just a bottle, or kind of a thing that's been knocked down. And I just wanted to read a quote. I mean, I found a kind of Ponzi quote by Richard Serra, who's an American sculptor who does these huge, big steel constructions, which are like curved forms. And he said, there's a really good quote, which is about looking, I think, and it was about kind of art and looking. He said, to see is a way of thinking, and conversely, to think is to see. An image of a thought is not a picture or a representation, but rather an experience in relation to time, in relation to what has been and what is to come. And I like that thought that art might be an image of thought, and if it's good, then it might be an experience that you relate to that kind of shapes you in some way. And he also said something else, which is perception, thinking, doing are historically bound and differ for each of us. It's the function of art in particular to open up unseen ways of seeing. I'm not suggesting these make you see different things, but it's just about the practice of looking and that being an important part of what you might do as an artist. And they're just kind of funny little things, kind of things out of place, or things that I've seen. Okay, so those are just some images about one part of the work I do. And I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about artists that I'm interested in, that have influenced me, and kind of explore a bit about the idea of like abstract language in a very kind of simple way. And just basically just to give you a bit of context about kind of where I come from and what I'm interested in. This is an image by an artist called Willem de Kooning, who was a Dutch immigrant to America, who was kind of one of the most famous people in the movement called the abstract expressionist movement. And a lot of my work I relates a lot to abstract expressionists, and I just wanted to show you some images. And I don't know. I read this kind of abstract art. It's quite known. It's quite self-conscious. It's very self-aware. It's obviously, it's abstract. There's not an object that it's depicting, but in some way it seems quite straightforward to me as an image, and it kind of relates to what I was talking about before in terms of kind of forms being kind of reminding you of different things. So like in this image I just see like the kind of black brush marks above the yellow. It's like clearly like pushing down on the yellow in some way. And the like funny kind of curvy forms on the left that are a bit ridiculous. And then there's like a blue area at the top which is kind of held in. And all of these things are just like little bits of a language, and they kind of come together to form an image that might be affected in some way. And what's it about? Is it an emotion? Is it like a reminiscence of a landscape? It's a set of thoughts and feelings. But anyway, so this is a Willem de Kooning picture. This is called Mahoning by Franz Klein, and I think it's from 1956, and it's kind of key abstract expressionist work. I think it really is, I don't know, it's really straightforward, it's just black and white, but I think it kind of illustrates that point as well. I mean, what's it reminiscent of? Is it kind of scaffolding or pipes or something? But there's also some kind of emotional content there. There's some like form that's constrained, there's some, like you can't help but feel those forms a little bit. And this is a painting by an artist called Philip Guston, who's another American artist from a similar time. This is called Tu Fellini. And I really like it. But it speaks in a similar kind of gestural language, but the gestures are much smaller, and they're kind of much less overblown. These little kind of brush marks here and there. And he uses kind of restricted colour palettes. They're very kind of conscious paintings. So he uses these kind of cadmium, orange, red, blues, greens, and black and white. And he kind of does these little marks and then kind of erases them. And somehow this seems really, to me, a picture of thought. It's kind of about doubt and about kind of questioning what he's doing, maybe a bit of kind of anxious and anxiety. And it seems to me like a really kind of interesting and good representation of a particular kind of 20th century consciousness, which I think maybe I'm quite a retro artist and I'm looking back a long way, but it seems somehow relevant still, this kind of self-awareness, this self-doubt, this making of yourself, your own image of your thoughts in this world. And I'm just going to show a few more artists I like as well. So this is by Ashil Gorky, who was an Armenian immigrant to America. And it's a bit earlier, it's from 1944, and it's called I haven't written down, that's unfortunate. It's something about the kind of an embroidered apron of my mother leads throughout my life. But anyway, one of the things that all of these artists have in common is this kind of interest and appreciation of the different qualities of paint. And they kind of all use paint in its different forms, and its different ways of applying it to kind of suggest different feelings, different emotions. And kind of if you're not painting an image, one of the things you're left with is the paint itself and the kind of qualities and possibilities of that. And I really like the intimacy, the kind of sexy intimacy of this painting, and the kind of way he uses like dripped paint. There's much more kind of intimate space than the other ones. It's like a very internal space, and then kind of these closed forms are interlapping and make it. This is an image by a painting by a British artist from a kind of slightly similar period, which I really like as well. And I like it because it relates to that kind of abstract language, but it's a bit more British and a bit more awkward and kind of a bit less overblown, a bit less kind of grandiose. It's a bit more public schoolboy and kind of puerile. It's kind of slightly less gracious mark making, and there's kind of like a squidge of white paint. It's not so like aesthetic, and the colours are a bit more muted and difficult. And I think, being English, I think that's what we're kind of one of the experiences we have. It's not. I think an American experience is like bigger and more kind of grand, but there's something kind of smaller and funnier about an English experience. And then just two more artists quickly. This is by Frank Auerbach, Primrose Hill from 1968, and he was a Jewish refugee from Germany as a child just before the Second World War, and then spent most of his life in the UK, and paints these quite kind of, in a way, quite traditional paintings. They're kind of landscapes, but he uses this very thick oil paint that's kind of overlaid and layered, and it's a very like visceral painting to see in real life because you can really feel the paint, and there's a real fizz of energy when you see it. It's kind of, it's just, he's kind of, where do these lines come from? They're like energy lines or something. But yeah, anyway. And the last artist I wanted to show was an artist called Howard Hodgkin, who's another British artist who uses a very, very simple kind of restricted language of brush marks and kind of using this like translucent colour, but using the full range of what that brush mark can do. And these, but he's very much involved in what colour can communicate and how like you read different colours, and they're quite intimate, but they're quite small. I think this is like 60 centimetres by 60 centimetres, but they're quite like maximal in their like emotional content. And another one which is called Haven't We Met? And yeah, I think the thing about all of these artists I like is they're self-aware, they're self-conscious about what they're doing, but there's a real emotional engagement to them. There's some kind of clarity to the emotional kind of pretension in them. It's kind of all there to see. The tricks are quite limited, although they're obviously their own, they speak of a particular language and a particular kind of painting making. But I like the way you can see all the marks, you can see all the different choices that they made, and that's a kind of quite generous way of making a picture, I think. Anyway, so I'm just going to show some pictures about my work, just to kind of show you where I've come from. And as Kathy said, I didn't do art as an undergraduate, study art as an undergraduate. After studying politics and economics, I studied at a place called the Prince's Drawing School, which is this funny small art school in East London, which is kind of quite conservative. It's based around observational drawing, and spent a lot of time drawing from the kind of the figure and then going out and drawing. And I always wanted to make pictures that had some kind of emotion, but I kind of started from this figurative place. And a bit like my walking around, this is an image of a place that's very close to me in London called the Holloway Road. And it's not it's not a very pretty road, but it's kind of a place I know well. And so I just started by going out and painting things. This is a motorway in Oxford, actually. And from there, I really wanted to kind of create a studio practice. This is me very beginning of making art at the age of 21, 22, and then going a bit later. And then, so I kind of go out, do these drawings, do these paintings, and then I kind of bring them back. And the first thing I started to do was make these kind of like, almost like ex voto, kind of religious icon kind of images of motorways. But at the same time, I was going to this bridge over a railway line, and would go and do these very quick paintings at kind of dusk, when everything's changing very quickly. You have to react very quickly to what's happening. And what I started to kind of realise was what I was painting wasn't, a thing. What I was actually painting was marks. I was making these marks that had some kind of charge or some kind of information through the choices I made in the colours. And I kind of realised that there was like a kind of, in a very simple way, like a kind of independent language was starting to come from it, of just kind of colours and forms and kind of the way the paint was put down. And I realised that it was kind of, the marks became increasingly separate from the image I was painting. They became increasingly gestural and kind of, and without me really understanding at the time, it was kind of, mirroring a lot more abstract expressions maybe were doing, but in a more sophisticated way. But I kind of realised that what I was painting wasn't, this isn't about a train, although there is a big train in the middle. It's kind of maybe more about, sex or doubt or, kind of desire or other things. But anyway, from there, I really wanted to build a language that was more about a kind of internal world, a kind of world that wasn't of the objective world out there, of having to paint things out there. And partly that's just like kind of practical. I moved, so I didn't have this train railway bridge to paint from. But partly it was about like trying to find a kind of language that could be used to explore a different realm of experience. And you may have seen I did lots of pictures, kind of cars have cropped up in my work quite a lot. I kind of take photos of them and did these drawings and paintings of them. And it partly just the fact that like if you try and do an observational painting of the world now, you can't really paint anything without there being a car in it. There's like cars everywhere, and there are these like funny objects that we live with, and they're kind of in our world. They're always like zooming past, or like they're kind of these physical objects that inhabit our worlds. So anyway, I started doing these drawings that were like trying to like meld the two kind of things together in a way. And I started using this kind of very simple form of a car to explore kind of emotional states in different ways. And it's quite, it's quite childlike. It's kind of using crayons and like just very simple mark making, but just trying to find a way of like structuring a kind of eternal landscape with an object. I mean, the other thing about doing images of cars is like it's kind of, if you're like trying to paint abstract paintings with emotions or something when you're kind of in your 20s, is kind of a bit ridiculous. And so instead I kind of painted cars and it just kind of cut through some of the ridiculousness in some way. And this is kind of a funky car. And this led to an exhibition. I had an exhibition in Gothenburg in Sweden, which is called Car Parts, which is using just these drawings, these kind of drawing paintings. And then my work has basically like kind of continued from there, continued from using this like little kind of childlike car form to explore the kind of more and different emotional states. And it was, this car art form was kind of locked in a bit by the experience of having my car stolen from outside my house. I left the key in the car boot door, and the car was stolen. And it actually came back 3 weeks later. It was extraordinary. It was like picked up, like empty fuel tank, and some like ropes and Rizzler papers. There wasn't much in it, but in that 3 weeks, this like experience of having my car stolen made me incredibly aware of cars. Like every single car I saw was like, could it be my car? Is that actually my car? And somehow like this kind of anxious state meant that it made more sense to paint cars. So anyway, basically all of the shapes you see in these pictures are kind of cars. This is not a very good image, but and they're kind of used to explore different, kind of different parts of the self or something. Like either like cars hiding behind pillars, maybe a car coming apart, cars kind of exposing themselves to above each other, cars knocking into each other in kind of lines. And I mean, they're very quick paintings. They kind of build up to them and then they just happen really quickly. They're kind of using paint in a kind of gestural, quick way. But so I like something about the energy of the mark making is important to me. These cars are like kind of separated from each other by a wall. And then I also make these little wooden sculptures, which basically like kind of toy cars, which I play with. And they're just kind of anxious cars, they're kind of cars knocking into each other or balancing on each other. And I had an exhibition at this gallery called Peckham Springs in London, and these are just some installation shots of those pictures, and another installation shot. And then from there, basically my kind of more recent work has been like continuing this, but in my more recent work, these cars have become a bit more deconstructed, and maybe they're kind of less fully formed, and they're a bit more layered, and they're about kind of emotions which are perhaps a bit less immediate and a bit less accessible, and they kind of, but the cars are still there, and so this is like a yellow car with like a little other car poking out, and there's still, these are works on paper about a metre by a metre and a half. And you've seen this one, these cars breaking up in different ways. And then other cars. I'm just trying to find ways, in kind of a quite naive, probably, quite straightforward way, trying to find ways of, in a really simple way, just trying to find colour and paint and forms that are like accurate to a particular emotion or a particular feeling, and using the information of that feeling to make those choices. And it's quite simple and straightforward, and I kind of want it to be like quite simple and straightforward, but I just want it to be accurate to those feelings in some way. Okay. So, this presentation is in lots of different parts. And this is the part which is about my stuff, the kind of work I'll be doing here. And I called the talk, From the Window You Could See the Alley, which is a line from a Cavafy poem called One Night. I'll just read it, the paragraph is, the room was cheap and sordid, hidden above the suspect owner. From the window you could see the alley, dirty and narrow. From below came the voices of workmen playing cards, enjoying themselves. And I mean, I just chose this because I kind of discovered Cavafy here and really loved his poems. But it was also something about an experience of Athens. And my project has been to kind of explore this different urban areas, the urban area of Athens, and just kind of get to know its kind of physical and atmosphere and the kind of different environments. And I've like been all over. I kind of focused on Kypseli and Exarchia and Piraeus, but haven't really stuck to that. I've just kind of free-form explored. But there's this particular experience of Athens I have, which is it's very dense, very urban, and kind of quite tall buildings. And you're very like constrained by its architecture, and it always seems like you're seeing things round the corner of things, or you're kind of seeing down alleys. You're always like your vision is led by different kind of buildings. And then also the sense that it's such a dense city that you always this sense of it kind of being some theatre in itself. There's all these, the whole, half of Greece is on this one, between these hills, and they're all kind of looking at each other. Everyone's looking at each other. There's constant sense that there's like people watching each other and kind of behaving towards each other. And something about that line from the window, you could see the alley, just kind of I liked. And so I'm just basically going to show you some photos, a bit like I showed at the beginning, of things. I mean, I called the talk also Observations from Athens, but I don't think I'm kind of qualified to make observations. But I've kind of noticed some things, and I'm going to show you some pictures of some of the things I've noticed. And one of the things is just the kind of amazing contrast between this like really quite extraordinary urban space and then this like Mediterranean light. And so you kind of get this like brightness amongst this kind of dirty, kind of dark, a kind of, and these like big buildings, you get these big shadows, and you get this like big contrast between this kind of bright light and these dark spaces that I found really exciting. This is just a photo from a demonstration that I went to, and there's just this sense of people like looking in on you and kind of being all these different people watching each other. Another thing is just this kind of amazing proliferation of arcades or cloisters, and this like kind of semi-conscious or conscious kind of use of the pillar everywhere. And it just means like all these buildings have them for like, I guess practical purposes, because it means you can build out further. But you have all these like covered spaces, these spaces where like there's shadows, there's darkness, and you're like almost inside but you're outside. So people warming themselves in a riot fire. And then just it's really great how you can get above Athens. It's some really amazing experience that I live in London, it's like flat everywhere, and you kind of don't ever get the sense of the city you're in. But in Athens, you can just walk up a hill and see everything. And it's this extraordinary patchwork of kind of concrete and marble everywhere. And I guess the other thing about being here is I've been kind of an observer. I've been looking in at things a lot, which is also about the idea about from the window you could see the alley. Lots of the things I've seen have been looking through windows, looking into things, looking down through things. And just kind of seeing what's going on, but not being quite involved with it. And that's just part of the experience of being here. And the other thing is just the architecture of Athens is almost like you kind of, after a while, you don't notice it. And I don't think Athenians don't think of it like very highly, but there's this extraordinary, like, kind of brutal, odd, big buildings that are kind of a bit weathered now, but have this kind of weight, this kind of massiveness that's a bit surprising. It's not like a massive massiveness, but it's like bigger than you expect. And then you also get this light coming through, and that's just an image of that. And just an image of that looking down to things, looking. Can you see that? Yeah, kind of looking through. Cats. I just quite like that. There's 9 cats in that. Interesting plumbing. Just I don't know what like that. Some fridges. The other side of the hill by Agia Marina, some kind of port, the kind of industrial bit, quite cool. An angry car, and then a tasteful dog. Yeah. Anyway, so those are my kind of images, my like kind of the product of looking around Athens, and just kind of one of the bits of the work I've done, which is just like looking a lot and exploring. And I mean, it's almost the end of what I'm going to present, and I hope you come upstairs and have a look at the paintings, which are kind of very different, and it's not entirely obvious the kind of link, but there is some link. There's some of the physical kind of experiences of being here got into the work. But alongside making paintings and taking photos, I also make little films, and in all of my exhibitions I've had a kind of film at the same time, which I like because it's like a kind of counterpoint to these quite kind of individualistic images I've made. And it gives me a way of like showing the world and how like they relate in some odd way. And I made a film that I'm going to show, which is a kind of it's kind of not fully finished. I haven't quite got all the footage I want for it, but it's kind of terribly tourist of me, and it's of the kind of demonstrations I've been to. But it's kind of about the experience of being an observer and kind of the experience of not necessarily being part of the demonstration, but being around it. And so it's just a short film.
Questo Guglielmo.
Aspetta se paro.
Di caso può dire
Allora,